Our scripture lesson is Genesis chapter 28, starting at verse 10. Just a comment about what's happening here. Conniving Jacob has incurred the wrath of his older brother Esau by tricking his old blind father into giving him the deathbed blessing that was rightfully belonged to Esau. Warned by his mother of Esau's murderous intentions, Jacob prudently takes flight. Hear now the word of God. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a stairway set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and to your offspring, and your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. The word of the Lord. Actually, I got to keep reading. I'm sorry. Let's keep reading. Can't stop. So Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took a stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. He called that place Beth-el, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give you 1/10. Now it's the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, Alex Rodriguez, A-Rod, and Brian Williams all have something in common. They all cheated in their quest for self-promotion. Governor McDonnell was convicted of public corruption and served time in a federal prison. New York Yankees A-Rod finally admitted using steroids earlier in his career and now faces the disgrace of shattered credibility and distrusted baseball records. NBC anchor Brian Williams exaggerated his heroic proximity to danger while covering the Iraq War in 2003. He received a 6-month suspension from the network and lost the anchor gig. We might not agree on the relative severity of these transgressions, but we can all appreciate that these famous men are paying dearly for their failures. Other people fail, but perhaps not in such a public way. Lying, cheating, manipulation, they're all around us, and the distrust and conflict that they generate are far-reaching and long-lasting. It would not surprise me if there were anyone here today, it would surprise me actually, if there were anyone here today who has not either broken trust or had trust broken to them. When these misfortunes happen, we may feel that God is far away, or that heaven has little or nothing to do with the harsh realities of life. Then we hear this story from the Genesis epic. A fearful, guilt-filled fugitive makes an improvised camp and settles down for the night. By dawn, he will be a changed man. Jacob's otherworldly experience at Bethel may seem to you to be the stuff of fantasy and romance, but you might be surprised. The story of the ancestors in Genesis is an account of the lives and destinies of the ancestors of the people of Israel. As we listen to the ancestor stories, which were retold and collected over hundreds of years, we perceive the role that the principal characters play in the drama, but we are also conscious of the way that the ancestors represent and prefigure the subsequent history of the people of Israel. So, we can listen with our ear attuned, as it were, to the melody and to the harmonic line. Give a listen. Abraham was a nomadic livestock herder who, on the strength of a promise from God, packed up and moved his family from Haran in northeast Syria today to Canaan, the West Bank. God gave Abraham and his wife Sarah a son in their old age, Isaac. As a young man, Isaac traveled from Canaan back to the land between the rivers to find a suitable wife from among his relatives. He married his second cousin, Rebekah, and returned to Canaan. Rebekah had twins, Esau and Jacob. Dysfunction in the family started early, as Isaac was partial to Esau, and Rebekah favored Jacob. Determined to promote Jacob's interests at the expense of Esau, Rebekah hatched a devious scheme by which Jacob was able to deceive his old blind father and get him to pronounce his deathbed blessing on Jacob the younger instead of on Esau, the firstborn son. Esau's rage was violent and unappeasable. He vowed to kill his brother Jacob. Jacob fled. He left Beersheba and headed north along the main road running through the center of Canaan. The only way that made sense was north, because as a fugitive from his vengeful brother, he needed to find someone who would take him in and help him. He would try to make it to Haran, in the land between the rivers. His uncle Laban lived there. That was his best bet. He was terror-stricken. He never knew when Esau might discover his escape and come after him. And he was ridden with guilt. Yes, it was his mother who dreamed up that absurd con, but he had happily gone along with it. Well, the scam worked. His father had given him the blessing that rightfully belonged to Esau, but what good was the promise of fruitful fields and vineyards when you were a fugitive fleeing for your life? What good was the promise of leadership over your family when you were forced to live hundreds of miles from them? As a young man and a son of a successful cattle herder, he should have had a bright future ahead of him. But because of his treachery and bullheadedness, the future was as bleak as it could possibly be. He was alone, frightened, full of remorse. What a mess he had made of things. As the sun was setting, he came to a place called Luz, almond tree in the local language. At Luz, the north-south road intersected with the main east-west road crossing Canaan. He decided to make camp there in an almond grove. In the morning, he would turn east toward the land between the rivers. But for now, he arranged his goat-skin bedroll, placed a large flat stone at his head to protect him from the wind. He lay down, and from sheer exhaustion, he fell fast asleep. In his deep sleep, he had a dream. In the dream, he saw a paved ramp firmly planted in the earth. and rising high into the sky, all the way up into heaven. Hurrying along the ramp, going up and coming down, going up and coming down, were heavenly messengers, obviously carrying out God's orders here on earth and returning to heaven to report on their activities. Who would have thought that there was so much business going on between heaven and earth? It was mind-boggling. Suddenly, the Lord appeared in the campsite and stood before Jacob. As the heavenly messengers went about their business, the Lord spoke, "I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac." Jacob had heard stories of the appearances of the Lord to his father and grandfather. He had always been filled with wonder and fear at the idea of a face-to-face encounter between God and mortals. But now here, it was happening to him. The Lord continued, "This land where you are lying and from which you are fleeing someday is going to belong to you and your descendants." This was too much. Jacob was headed for Haran, hundreds of miles to the east. He very much doubted that he would ever return to Canaan, and much less own land here. The Lord ignored his skeptical look. "Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth," God said, "and they will spread out over this land in every direction." Not going to happen, Jacob thought. Not as long as Esau is alive. The Lord tried one more time to get Jacob focused on something other than his own immediate plight. "Jacob, this is not all about you. It's about your offspring and what I will do for them. Even more important, it's about all the families of the earth that will receive my blessing through your descendants." Seeing that this magnificent, long-range project was too much for Jacob, the Lord got down to practicalities. "Jacob," he said, "know that I am with you. And as long as I am with you, you can count on my protection wherever you go. Someday I'm going to bring you back here to Canaan so that we can get started on this project that I've just told you about." The Lord paused and then slowly and emphatically said, "I will not leave you. I will not leave you until I have done all that I have promised you." With these promises ringing in his ears, Jacob woke up. He knew that it was a dream, but if anything, that only intensified his fear and dread. Remembering the ramp reaching up into heaven in his dream, he said, "This is the gate of heaven." Shuddering with the fearful realization of his face-to-face encounter with God, he exclaimed, "The Lord truly is in this place. This is the house of God." By the way, that's how the place got its current name, Bethel, the house of God. Early the next morning, Jacob got up and he decided to create a memorial to testify to his face-to-face encounter with God. He scooped out a hollow. He took the flat stone that he had used as a windbreak during the night, and he set it upright and fixed it firmly in place. Then he poured olive oil over the top of the stone in a sacred act of consecration. Of course, over time, that sacred stone would become the central focus of a sanctuary at Bethel, a famous attraction to pilgrims for hundreds of years. It all started with that stone that Jacob placed there. Now Jacob made some new commitments. Conscious of the awesome responsibility that the Lord's appearance had conferred upon him, he made a solemn vow. He said, if God is with me as he promised, I will always count on his protection and provision, and someday I will come back here to Canaan in safety. Bottom line, the Lord will be my God. Willful, devious, treacherous Jacob, determined to bend every person and every circumstance to his will, now accepted a superior power over his life, a greater wisdom, a deeper love. The Lord will be my God. He was a changed man. Some of us allow ourselves to be defined by our past, especially our failures and disappointments. The past controls us. It prevents us from accepting new challenges or seeing new possibilities. We may think that God is far off and unconcerned about us, uninvolved in our daily lives. Perhaps we've forgotten how close we always are to the gate of heaven. Jacob's otherworldly experience at Bethel may seem to us to be the stuff of fantasy and romance, far removed from the harsh or monotonous reality of daily life. But Jacob's dream reminds us that God, yes, rules from heaven, but God is also always present and near to us here on earth, ready to protect us, ready to carry us forward into an uncertain future. We live at the gate of heaven. God waits for us there. If you're shackled by the failures and disappointments of the past, come meet God at the gate of heaven. Meeting God, of course, will be unnerving for any mortal. If it weren't for the support of Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ's sacrifice on the cross, we wouldn't dare approach God at the gate of heaven. But because of Christ, we do. But be aware that meeting God will require new commitments. It will also change us and open up new possibilities. Come meet God at the gate of heaven and get ready to change.
Let's all stand and sing our next hymn, 833.